Last Sunday, the railway world celebrated the anniversary of a very special event, where in 1938, driver Joe Duddington said, "hang on" to everyone around him, turned his cap back and sent his cheese-wedged engine straight into the record books. But is it really the fastest recorded speed on a steam engine? Well, technically, no. There was one who on a technicality went faster, but it was unintentional and ended up having devastating consequences. In 1905, a very young and excitable Arthur Peppercorn started his railway career at Doncaster as a young apprentice. On the Great Northern Railway, the superintendent of the carriage and wagon works took a shine to the youngster and decided to take him under his wing to mentor him personally until the young apprentice practically became a member of the family. Arthur learnt a lot from his mentor, and his teacher remarked that he had great promise. A huge remark when you consider that the superintendent was a certain railway superstar and legend, Sir Nigel Gresley. Arthur's world was shattered when Gresley suddenly passed away in 1941. It was a huge shock to the LNER and the railway as a whole, and left a gaping void that was not going to be easy to fill. Edward Thompson, who was held in a high regard with the top ranks of the LNER, was elevated to Chief Mechanical Engineer. In 1946, Arthur was finally promoted after Thompson retired, but he remained the same humble and modest man and was more popular and well-liked than his predecessor. Thompson's departure gave Arthur a lot more creative freedom, and he started to work on several new engines while finishing some of Thompson's previous projects. One of the new engines was the new A2 class. Right from the first one off the line, the engines were cutting edge in design and featured the best ideas from Gresley and the best from Thompson. The new A2s featured the innovative self-cleaning smoke boxes and electric lighting in the cab. The self-cleaning smoke box wasn't perfect, and some engines with single chimneys struggled with shy steaming, but the inclusion of the double Clyde gas pipe seemed to solve the problem. In fact, they improved the engine's fuel efficiency, so it was a win-win all round. Speaking of fuel, the new A2 carried a throwback to one of Gresley's largest engines, the P2. While not as large as the P2s, the A2 carried the same size fireboxes. The larger firebox was still a fireman's nightmare, however it made the smaller A2s a lot more efficient. They were so economical that they ended up replacing the P2s and the Thompson's rebuilt A2s on many express passenger services in the notorious stretch between Aberdeen and Edinburgh. The 15's locomotives worked without incident right up to the 1960s. Over time, each engine reached the end of its life and was scrapped, until there was only one left. Blue Peter was built in 1948 and was named, like its brothers, after a famous racehorse. Blue Peter ended up at York at first and worked across the East Coast Main Line before moving to Scotland right up until the 60s. As the last ever peppercorn to be overhauled at Darlington, Blue Peter was often called upon for rail tours and excursions. Sadly, the age of steam came to an end, and after travelling over the West Coast Main Line in 1966, Blue Peter was withdrawn and put into storage, the driver and fireman not even bothering to clean the firebox and smoke box when they left. Laid alone and forgotten for several years, Blue Peter finally saw daylight again in 1968 after it was purchased by Jeff Drury. Jeff was originally after a Gresley A1 Pacific, but after discovering none had survived the cutter's torch, he settled on Blue Peter as an alternative replacement. After being left in a shed for 2 years, Blue Peter needed a fair amount of cleaning and work and an expensive overhaul to get her ready for the main line once again. Luckily, at the time of Blue Peter's purchase, a famous programme of the same name couldn't miss the opportunity to help. The children's show Blue Peter helps campaign for donations to help the engine's restoration, and in 3 short years the campaign worked and Blue Peter was renamed as, well, Blue Peter in a special ceremony at Doncaster Works. The programme would remain closely connected to the engine throughout the engine's time in preservation. It was moved to the Dinting Railway Centre, where it underwent light duties, and it was taken under the wing of the North Eastern Locomotive Trust. By the time of the engine's second overhaul in 1991, the show was heavily involved, often reporting on the engine's progress, and it was renamed again. It was moved to the North York Moors Railway, where it earned its mainline certificate, and after nearly 30 years, it ran on the main line full-time once again. Everything was going great for Blue Peter, and it was a very popular engine, especially among the younger generations who recognised it from the show. The engine appeared to inspire a new love for steam engines, but on the 1st of October 1994, everything changed. Following both public pressure and pressure from businesses for more steam-powered excursions, British Rail had decided to lessen the total blanket ban on steam engines and allowed for more engines to use the network. On the 1st of October, they allowed an excursion for a preserved steam engine to run from Edinburgh to York via Newcastle for the first time since the 1960s. The operator chose Blue Peter as the best and most suitable candidate. A crew was found and were excited of the prospect of driving an engine they had never used before. So with a full train of excited passengers, they set off. The first leg of the run was wonderful. Crowds lined the tracks, taking in the wonderful sight of the green peppercorn and its rake of coaches as it hurtled past. The train had to make an unscheduled stop at Durham to let off some passengers, and it was at this time the crew let water into the boiler ready for the hill at the other side of the viaduct. But unknown to all, they had overfilled it. In the now infamous clip, the train signalled ready to go, and the move from the platform was slow but steady. As they crossed the viaduct, the weight of the coaches and the incline caused the wheels to slip. The driver handled the slip poorly by shutting off the regulator, then opening it too early. The slip caused the overfull water in the boiler to surge forward, jamming the regulator into the open position. This, in railway speak, known as priming, something which the A2s were notorious for, especially in the hands of inexperienced crews. The open regulator let steam flow freely into the cylinders which pumped the wheels. The wheels slipped and spun faster and faster as the weight of the train kept them from moving an inch. The driver and firemen desperately tried to get the engine under control. The driver attempted to wind the reversing gear back to mid-position, but the gear span around with the force of the wheels, severely injuring him. The crews could do nothing more but whistle in distress, and with an almighty crash, the cylinder heads exploded as the entire motion disintegrated. Finally, after what seemed like an age, the engine stopped and the safety valve opened, releasing the rest of the pressurised steam. Blue Peter was towed to Thornaby, where the damage was assessed. The motion was obliterated, the driving wheels were practically destroyed, and the cylinders were just shells. After viewing footage of the accident and through careful calculations, it was estimated that the wheels were spinning at roughly 142 miles an hour. The cause of the accident was the inexperience of the crew to the A2. The accident brought forward the importance of the crews not being taught how to operate specific engines, not just have general knowledge. It is lessons learned even today, and many engine owners still accompany their engines to new locations to assist the crews and advise them of the engine's unique runnings and ensure the smooth running of the engine. It took 18 months to repair Blue Peter's damage, but the damage to the steam engine's reputation running on main lines took several years to heal. British Rail never allowed another steam-powered excursion to use that stretch of line again up until its demise in 1997, and it's only recently were steam engines allowed to run the line again. In 1998, Blue Peter was allowed back on the main line and ran a successful mainline life. In 1998, to celebrate 40 years of the kids' show, Blue Peter was given special permission to run from Edinburgh to London. But in 2002, the engine's boiler ticket ran out and it ran for the last time on the North York Moors Railway before going to the Darlington Railway Centre and then on to storage following the museum's renovations, where it would be announced that they would not host the engine again. The engine remained at storage in Barrow Hill Roundhouse while money was raised for its overhaul. The engine was given a new coat of paint, apple green, and was lovingly looked after as it waited for its turn in the shed. However, it received news that the Drury family, who had owned Blue Peter all of its life in preservation, sold the engine to Jeremy Hoskins and was taken under ownership of the Royal Scot Locomotive and General Trust. The Trust moved the engine out of storage to Crewe with the intention of returning the engine back to its original mainline glory. As we speak, the engine is now under the care of the Trust and is currently undergoing its overhaul. It is steadily progressing, and it is hoped the engine will be back in steam, hopefully in the near future. It is technically an unintentional record breaker, and while I take nothing from Mallard and her achievements, Blue Peter really showed the world what a steam engine could really be capable of. The engine has defied the odds of survival, has had an accident that would put out most other engines in the scrapyard and still come out running. The engine has inspired thousands of children through its many appearances on the TV show of the same name and lives up to its racehorse name of being a winner. Blue Peter is one of the strongest, unforgivable and formidable engines that has ever graced the rails, and for that it has clearly earned its spot on the main line and in history.